In 1977, a country singer walked into a Nashville studio to record a song she didn't think much of. The engineers rolled tape for what's called a scratch vocal, a rough first pass, just a placeholder, something to be thrown away and replaced later with the real thing. She sang it once, start to finish, in a single take. And then a strange thing happened. When she went back to record the version that was supposed to count, she couldn't do it. She tried again, and every time, something was missing. The feeling she'd had on that first throwaway take, she just couldn't get it back. So they made a decision that sounds almost impossible for a song this big. They kept the practice version, the one nobody was supposed to hear. That song was Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue. It went to number 1. It crossed over to number 2 on the pop charts in America and into the top 5 in Britain. It won a Grammy. And for the rest of her life, the woman who sang it would be known all over the world by the name on that record, Crystal Gayle. But here's what almost nobody knows. For the first part of her career, that woman wasn't allowed to be Crystal Gayle at all. She was told, in so many words, to be someone else. And the story of how she clawed her way out of that and where she is right now, at 75 years old, is far stranger and far quieter than the hit song ever let on. Stay with me, because this isn't the story you think it is. To understand it, you have to go back to a coal mining town in Kentucky, and to a name that wasn't Crystal Gayle. She was born Brenda Gayle Webb in Paintsville, Kentucky, on January 9th, 1951. She was the last of 8 children. Her father was a coal miner who developed black lung disease, and when Brenda was 4 years old, the family moved north to Wabash, Indiana, chasing better medical care. She would later say she could sing before she could walk. But Brenda Webb had something most aspiring singers would kill for, and it would turn out to be the very thing that nearly buried her. Her oldest sister was Loretta Lynn. By the time Brenda was a teenager, Loretta Lynn wasn't just famous. She was on her way to becoming one of the defining voices in the history of American country music, the coal miner's daughter. And when your sister is already a star, doors open. At 16, Brenda stood on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry, filling in for Loretta, who'd fallen ill. The connections were real, the help was real, and that's exactly where the trouble started. When Brenda graduated high school in 1970 and signed her first record deal, it was with Decca Records, Loretta's label. Her management was tied to Loretta's world. Even her name was a problem. Decca already had a singer named Brenda Lee, so they told her she had to change it. The story goes that Loretta was driving past a sign for a fast food chain called Crystal and said, "That's your name. Crystals are bright and shiny, like you." And so Brenda Webb became Crystal Gayle, a new name, a famous sister, a major label. It should have been the beginning of everything. Instead, for years, almost nothing happened. The records came out, and they went nowhere. A few of them scraped the lower end of the country charts and vanished. And the reason was something Crystal Gayle would only be able to say out loud decades later. The label didn't want Crystal Gayle. They wanted another Loretta Lynn. They handed her songs written in her sister's style, produced her to sound like her sister, and pushed her out as a kind of echo. One music critic, looking back, dismissed those early singles with a brutal little phrase. He called them Little Loretta Records. Think about what that does to a person. You have a voice of your own, and every door that opens for you only opens because it leads back to your sister. Years later, Crystal put it plainly. She said it didn't take her long to realize she was only there because she was Loretta's sister. Her career, at this point, was effectively stalled, and if nothing changed, the story would have ended there. A footnote, a famous singer's little sister who never quite made it. But the turning point, when it came from the most unexpected direction possible. It came from Loretta herself. Because here is the twist at the heart of this whole story. The sister whose shadow was smothering Crystal's career was also the one who told her how to escape it. Loretta sat her down and gave her advice that almost no established star would give a younger rival. She told her to stop. "Stop singing my songs," she said. "We have one Loretta Lynn, and we don't need another." That was permission, and Crystal took it. In 1974, she did the hard thing. She walked away from Decca, away from her sister's label, her sister's sound, the safety of that famous name doing the work for her. She signed with a different label, United Artists, and she put herself in the hands of a Nashville producer named Alan Reynolds. And Reynolds heard something in her that Decca never bothered to look for. He didn't want a traditional country belter. He steered her towards something softer, smoother, more intimate, a sound that floated somewhere between country, pop, and folk. It was a gamble. It meant she would no longer fit neatly into Nashville's idea of a country singer, but it was, finally, hers. And if you think the slow years were frustrating, what happened next moved fast. The new sound started working almost immediately. In 1975, Wrong Road Again became her first real hit. Then came another, then another. The woman who couldn't buy a hit at Decca was suddenly a star at United Artists, and Reynolds believed she was sitting on the edge of something much bigger, a true crossover, a song that could break out of country radio entirely and conquer the pop charts. He just needed the right song. In 1977, a songwriter named Richard Lee brought one in, a quiet, aching ballad called "Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue." And here's a detail that tells you how close this whole thing came to never happening. The song wasn't even written for Crystal Gayle. It had been intended for the British singer Shirley Bassey. But when Alan Reynolds heard it, he turned to Lee and told him, "You're not sending that song anywhere. It was staying. It was hers." You already know what that one-take scratch vocal became. #1 on the country chart, #2 on the Billboard Hot 100, top 5 in the United Kingdom. The album it came from, We Must Believe in Magic, made history. It became the first album by a woman in country music to be certified platinum. In 1978, Crystal Gayle won the Grammy for Best Female Country Vocal Performance. The same year, both major country music institutions named her their Female Vocalist of the Year. The little sister who'd been told to be an echo was now, by any measure, a headliner. And the hits did not stop. Through the late 70s and into the 80s, she stacked up #1 after #1, 16 of them on the US country chart, according to Billboard's chart data. Talking in Your Sleep, Half the Way, a chart-topping duet with Eddie Rabbitt called You and I. She hosted her own primetime television specials. She sang on a film soundtrack alongside Tom Waits for director Francis Ford Coppola. She even became, by one account, the first artist ever to film a performance on the Great Wall of China. And then there was the hair. Because by now, Crystal Gayle wasn't only a voice, she was an image. She had grown her hair to a length that almost defied belief, nearly to the floor. It became her signature, the thing people pictured the instant they heard her name. At one point, in the early 90s, the upkeep and the headaches got to be so much that she seriously considered cutting it all off. It was her own daughter who stopped her. Her daughter told her, "You can't cut your hair. You won't be Crystal Gayle." Sit with that line for a second, because it's the whole story folded into one sentence. The girl who'd spent years being told she wasn't allowed to be herself had become someone so completely, so unmistakably herself, that her own child couldn't imagine her any other way. But fame has a shape. It rises, and then it levels, and then, for almost everyone, it quietly comes back down. And what happened to Crystal Gayle after the hits is the part of the story that the radio never tells you. In 1990, a single called Never Ending Song of Love crept onto the country chart and then slipped off again. It would be the last time one of her songs ever charted. Not because she stopped working, she never stopped working, but because the format moved on, the way it always does, toward younger voices and newer sounds. The trophies and the honors kept arriving, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2009, but the hits, the thing that had defined the center of her life, had gone quiet. And here's what's remarkable. She didn't fight it, and she didn't disappear into bitterness over it. She just kept singing, only now she sang whatever she wanted. She made a gospel album. She made an album of old jazz standards as a tribute to the songwriter Hoagy Carmichael. She recorded an album of children's music. She ran a gift shop in Nashville for the better part of 2 decades. The career stopped being a chase up the charts and became something slower and more personal. And then, in 2017, came a moment that close a circle no one could have scripted. Almost 50 years after she'd first stood in for her sister on that stage as a teenager, Crystal Gayle was invited to become an official member of the Grand Ole Opry, country music's most sacred institution. And the person who formally inducted her, who welcomed her in, was Loretta Lynn, the same sister whose shadow had once nearly ended her career and whose advice had once saved it, was now standing beside her at the summit of the thing they had both given their lives to. The rivalry that journalists had spent decades inventing, both women had always insisted it never existed. Loretta once said it was all in other people's minds. That night made it look true. It would be one of their last great moments together. In October of 2022, Loretta Lynn died at her Tennessee ranch at the age of 90. And later that year, at a major country music ceremony, Crystal Gayle walked out with her other sister, Peggy Sue, and the two of them sang, a tribute from the surviving sisters to the one who had gone first. So where does that leave Crystal Gayle now? If you came into this video expecting the story of a frail woman in her final years, fading quietly away, let me correct the record, because the truth is better than that. As of 2026, Crystal Gayle is 75 years old, and she is still performing. This past spring, she sang at the Grand Ole Opry House. She has concert dates on her calendar. She has slowed down, yes, but not for the reasons people assume. Late in 2025, she tore the meniscus in her knee. It was painful and it was frustrating, and it forced her to cancel a planned trip overseas to Belfast. Her doctors were worried about the risk of blood clots on a long flight. She was honest about how hard that was. She said that, mentally, you go through a kind of, why me? But she also said something else, something that lands differently when you know everything she came through to get here. She said, I've had a great career. I've had so many wonderful people behind me, and I feel very lucky. That's not the voice of someone at the end of something. That's the voice of someone who knows exactly what she was given and exactly what she built with it. And when you step back and look at the whole arc, what you see is one of the quietest, most underrated acts of self-belief in the history of American music. Crystal Gayle was handed the single most valuable thing a young singer could possibly want, a direct connection to a superstar, and it nearly cost her everything. Her real career didn't begin until she found the courage to set that gift down and walk away from it, to stop being the echo, to risk being nobody in order to become herself. The little sister who was told the world only had room for one Loretta Lynn went out and proved that the world had room for Crystal Gayle too. 16 number one hits, a Grammy, a song so effortless it was recorded by accident on a take that was meant to be erased. Maybe that's the real lesson hiding inside this whole story. Sometimes the thing you're not supposed to keep, the rough version, the accident, the take where you finally stop trying to sound like anyone else, turns out to be the truest thing you'll ever make. If you enjoyed this one, stay a while. There are more stories like it, about the voices you remember and the lives behind them, waiting for you right here.